In this video, we'll be going over a C# video on two-dimensional arrays. So before we summed all the elements of a two-dimensional array using a pair of nested loops to add the contents of each element to an accumulator variable. So that was the last video that was in the playlist. So in this video, we'll add the values in just in the rows. And then in either the next video or the next part, we'll add all the values in the columns. So remember, there's kind of like a x-axis and a y-axis. So you can think of like when you pass parameters, it's like x comma y. So then for rows you're passing x, and for y for columns you're passing y, or for y you're passing columns. So we'll just do an example on that. So here we'll just have 3 fields. So we'll say that we have a constant int, private constant int. So private constant int rows points to 3. Actually, we just go with 2. Then here we'll say private constant int calls points to 2. So here we have we have private int array will pass in, so we'll instantiate a two-dimensional array. So here we'll say private int of array index, comma. We'll just call it numbers, and we'll point it to a 2D array initialization list. So we'll just add some easy values. So here we'll just pass in like 1, 2, 3, 4. Then here we'll add a comma to the last row. We'll hit enter to bring the curly bracket down to the next line. Then we'll open another row with a set of curly brackets. So then here we'll pass in 5, 6, 7, and then 8, and then we'll have a comma. We'll open a new row on the next line, and here we'll pass in 9, 10, 11, 12. So there's no comma on the last curly bracket, and then we already have one more down here. We'll just add a semicolon to it. Okay, so here we'll have another field, so we'll say we have a private int total value. So right now, it's just going to be initialized to 0. So we can try to make a method to do this again. So we'll go under the constructor here. So we'll say private void. Private void. We'll call it 2D. So that stands for two-dimensional. Then here we'll pass in rows. Or we could say sum rows, which is like all the values added up. So then here we'll just pass in a parameter. We'll say int array. We'll take a comma there. Actually, sorry, we'll just do it like this: int array. Int array of array index, comma, and we'll just call it array. You could call it numbers if you want. It should be fine. Unless it doesn't, okay, so let's just try that and see. We might have to call it a different name. Whoops. Okay, so we'll just start with numbers first. So I'm not sure if I've used the same parameter yet. So here we'll say that we'll have a nested loop. We'll say for int I points to 0. I is less than rows, I plus plus. Then we'll nest that to another loop, and then we'll say for int j points to 0, j is less than calls, j plus plus. There seems to be an error somewhere. Let me just check where that is. Sorry. On line 30, private void. What's wrong with that? Private void. Oh wait, sorry. I don't think I can start a method name with a number. So we'll just say sum 2D rows, or sum 2D array rows. Okay, so I think that was it. So let's just try taking that out for a sec. Is that it? Yeah, I don't think you can start a method name with a number. So we'll just change that to a string. So sum 2D array rows, and then in the inner nest we'll say we'll have a local variable total. Actually, sorry, we'll just access our field since we already have one. So we could just say I think we could use this for a field. We could try it and see if it works. So we'll just say set total 0. So I don't think we've talked about this too much. So you can just use the this keyword to access the fields. I'll try to actually just do a video on that, a separate video. Let me just make a note of that actually. Okay, I've made a note of that to do a video if I haven't done one yet. So you can use this to access the fields, so we can try that. So we can say this dot total. So I've used this keyword several times in the Java tutorial, so you can see that if you want, it's in the Java playlist. It's exactly the same thing. You can just use it to access fields or global keywords. Oh, I think so. We can just try that here. So here we can say total points to 0. This dot total points to 0. Actually, sorry. Instead of bringing the nest down here, we'll just put this line, this dot total points to 0, in the first, in the outer for loop. So here we have for int I points to 0, I is less than rows I plus plus, and we have this dot total points to 0. Then on the inner nest, then we'll say this dot total plus equals number plus equals, what happened there? Plus equals numbers array of array index. Sorry, I think something happened to the keyboard. Let me just check that. Okay, so we'll say numbers of array index I comma j. That's going to access the 2D elements. And I think still, is that actually still in the loop? Let me just check that. Okay, so we have, I think that's in the for loop, and then still, no, is that outside the for loop? I think there might be an error in this, so we can just try it. I think it's supposed to be outside here. But the code that I have here in my notes from my professor, so they have the message box here. I think that's false. That's not correct, so we'll just move that down here. We'll say message box.show here. We'll pass a string as a parameter, so we'll say the total of row. We'll close a string. Then plus. We'll say plus. So we'll concatenate row and then plus. And then the string, another string, sorry, we should have said, I think per I. So actually, I think this should be in the, it might actually be correct because we're accessing I here. So within the outer for loop, then here we'll say messagebox.show. Then here we'll pass a string the total of row, and then we'll close the string. Then concatenator will add plus, and then here row, and then plus. The string is, Oh, sorry. Instead of rows, just say I. Plus is, and then here we'll say plus. We'll access total. I think we could just access. We could say this dot total. Okay, that should work. Okay, that should be everything. So in the constructor, then we can just call. I think it is. Did I miss something here? No, the constructor's down here. So then I think we can just. So this method just takes one parameter. It takes an array. So here we can call. I know it's a Windows Forms app. It's not really for this kind of stuff. You want to use a console app for this. But you can just pass in here to the constructor. You can say we can just call some 2D array. Some 2D array rows. I think I spelled it wrong, so I'll just change that to a Y. So some 2D array rows, and then we'll pass in the array numbers here. And that's going to call our message box to show up on the screen. So we'll just save that. I don't think we actually, we did. Okay, so we'll just save that and run it. You won't see it, but I'll just tell you if it works or not. So just like a pop-up window is going to pop up, and it'll just tell you the answer to the question. Okay, so every time. Okay, so this should have probably had some spaces here. So it says the total of row 0 is 3. So as you can see, everything's just joined together. There's no spaces here. So the values are okay. So I actually messed this one up because see here how we have rows is set to 2 and calls is set to 2, but our array actually is 1, 2, 3 by 4, I think. So let's just we can remove some of these. You might get an error with that, so just make sure you have the right amount of allocated indexes. That one doesn't have a comma. Okay, so that's fine. Then we'll add some spaces. So we'll format the string a little bit here, so we'll just add a space. You don't have to do that one, but you can. So all you have to do is just add some spaces there. So a space there, and here. Whoops, not there. Here and then here. That should fix it. You can also use a /t for a tab. Okay, so it says the total of row is 3, so that should be 1 plus 2, that's correct. The total of row 0 is 3, so this is row 0. So it's just 1 plus 2 equals 3. Then hit OK, and then for the next, now it's telling you when you hit OK, it's saying that the total of row 1 is 11, because 5 plus 6 is 11. So that's correct. And then the format pops up as well, which we don't have anything in the form. So we can now just change this to sum the columns of a 2D array, and then we'll finish up with 2D arrays. So we have constant in rows. Rows points to 2, calls points to 2. We'll set that again, that's fine. We have so 3 fields here: private constant int rows, private constant int calls, private int array of array index numbers, which is a 2D array. So now in the method we could change it to some 2D array calls. And here we could change the string to COL. And then in the method call we can change the name as well. We'll have to change the name here for some 2D array and then calls. So we'll just check the loop just to make sure. There's probably going to be some changes here, so we'll have a loop here. Actually, is there only? I think there's only one loop. Actually, no. Okay, so there's a little bit of a change here. So we have total as a field. Okay, so for int, I think we're doing this backwards here. Because before we have, they were using, let me just check, I think they were using row first, they're accessing row. To now, nope. Yeah, that's correct, they were accessing rows first. So they were accessing row first for the code that we just did. So now we're going to access call first instead. So I believe then we'll have to say here for j points to 0, j is less than calls j plus plus. That's the outer for loop. Then we set here this dot total points to 0, same thing. So then here we have for int. I think we're going to change this to I. They're using row and call, but we'll just use I and j. So then here we'll have for I points. Is that correct? For they're starting at 0. So for int I points to 0, I is less than calls up here. Sorry, for j points to 0, j is less than calls j plus plus. Then here we have for int I points to 0, I is less than rows I plus. This should be I plus plus. Then in the inner nested for loop we have total. So this dot total plus equals numbers of array index I comma j. So let's just try that and see if it works. Oh, there's something wrong here. J. So for in j, the total of call plus tingle. This one should be j. Let's try that. That's correct. Okay, so we have it's telling us the total for here for row 0 is the very left column going down, so we're adding 1 plus 5. So we'll hit OK, and then on the next column we have 2 plus 6, so that equals 8. That's correct. So maybe we should step through this. Maybe we don't really need to, so let's just see for int j points to 0, j is less than. Okay, so we accessed. They're all the same number, so it's kind of tricky here. I think no, not because of this. So we're saying okay. Actually, I think was that wrong? It might have been wrong. So let me just check. So summing the columns of a 2D array. So we have row is less than rows here. Sorry, j is less than. This one should be j is less than calls. And then in the inner for loop it should be I is less than rows. Let's try that. It's the same value though, so it's not really changing anything. We can step through this one in the debugger actually, so let's just, so that's correct because it's 1 plus 5 and then 2 plus 6 is 8. So let's just set some breakpoints just to see how this one is working in memory, so we'll just set a breakpoint here. I'm not sure if it lets you set them on fields in C#. Okay, so I don't think it did. What's happening with that? Nope. It's only going to let me set one on the constructor and here. Whoops. Not here. Whoops. For here, it's only going to let me set one there and there. Okay, so I'll click the debug icon. Alright, so it loaded, so we're just going to step into 2D array calls. We'll step into the method. So when the line executes, then the method, the code execution is going to transfer from some 2D array calls to the definition, passing in the numbers array, which we can't see in C# in the debugger. We can't see the fields. I'm not sure why. I can ask ChatGPT if there's a way to show the field. I don't think there is, but there might be a special way to just see them somewhere. Okay, so now we're in some 2D array calls. So we're at the outer J loop. So we're saying for int j points is 0, j is less than calls j++. Actually, it's not even on that line yet. Okay, so now we'll step into that. So here it says this dot total points to 0. So we'll step over that. We can see that j points to 0 to start. Okay, so we can see that we have I and j both pointing to 0, and then our numbers array. Actually, did our numbers array pop up? Probably because we passed it in as a method. That might be why. We pass it into the method parameters. So we can see that. Is it showing that when I click the dots, is it going to show everything? There we go. So we have 1, 2. So it's showing us the index is 0, index 0, 0, index 0, 1, index 1, 0, index 1, 1. So index 0, 0 points to the value 1. Right there, and then the index 0, 1. So the columns go left to right. So then we have the value 2 for index 0, 1. Then for value 1, 0, we have 5. And then for index 1, 1, we have the value 6. Okay, so then now we're just back down here. Actually, where are we? I think we're here. No, that's not. I think we're here now. Because do we have total? Let's just check. I can't see over. I think if this. It's over here. No, we can't be there. I think actually we're here. For j points is 0. You're showing me the arrow there. For j, so for int j points is 0, j is less than calls j++. So I'm going to step in. Okay, so then now here we have j. So we have j points at 0, j is less than calls. So what's calls? Calls is 2. It's not showing us that field in the debugger. So did we already step over this dot total? where are we? We're here, okay. So as you can see, j points to 0 at this time. And then here we're saying, okay, so then now we're at, now we're in the inner for loop, so we're going to step in. We'll step in. So everything's set to 0, j is 0 and I is 0. Okay, so I think the trick here is that they swap these numbers right there. So here we say this dot total. If you're wondering why everything was the same, because we set I pointing to 0 and then now we're setting j pointing to 0, but it's the same thing. We're saying j is less than calls, which is 2, and I is less than rows, but even though we flip them, it's still the same thing. If you're wondering why, it's because here, I think, so for in the index here we have this dot, so now we're at this dot total points to, or this dot total points to, it'll say this dot total points to this dot total plus. So right now total is set to 0. So total equal to 0 plus numbers of array index I and j, but notice how these are flipped. We're accessing I in the inner for loop rather than the outer for loop, and we're accessing j on the outer for loop rather than the inner for loop. So you can see here that but then we're accessing it like a normal array iteration, as if we were just accessing the rows and columns in normal order. So we're passing in I and then j, but I represents the columns. Oh, sorry, I represents the columns. I think that's correct, because so we're accessing call first, but we're still passing in numbers of array, but we're flipping them though. So let's just see. So what's the numbers of I? What's the numbers array index of I comma j? So we have 0 for j and 0 for I. So that would be the value 1. So this dot total points to. So this dot total points to this dot total, which is 0 plus should be 1. So we'll step over. Okay, so then we'll step into again. It's actually not showing us the total variable. So then we'll step in here again. So I is going to equal I 0 plus 1, so it's going to equal 1 now. So it's going to continue as long as I is less than 2. So it'll have another iteration. So we'll step in. This dot total is going to point to this dot total, which is in this case 1. Plus numbers array index I in this case 1. So notice how this time we incremented. We're adding 1 to the column first rather than instead of being here, because last time when we ran this code to access the row to add the rows first, then we shifted from 0, 0 to 0, 1. But in this case we shifted from 0, 0 to 1, 0. And that's because they flipped the sign. It's a little bit confusing. You might want to actually just call j and I rows and calls in this case. So now it should be adding the value of 5 to 1. So 5 plus 1. So now it's going to check this condition, and it's going to this condition is going to be false now because I points to, if I adds 1 to 1. So it'll be I points to 2, I is less than 2, so is 2 less than 2. That's false, that's not correct. That's a false, that's not a true statement, so then therefore this block would end and would go back up to the top loop. And I think I stepped over the last iteration. Actually, no, sorry. So because this inner for loop ended, there's still one more line of code in the before the last outer for loop ends. So it's going to tell us the current value. So a message box will pop up. I'm not sure if it actually popped. Oh, it did pop up. So it says the total of column 0 is 6. So that's what we said. So hit OK. So we'll loop back up here to the top. So now J is going to, so J was equal to 0 before, so now J is going to take 0 and add 1 to itself, so it's going to point to 1. So now J points to 1, J is less than 2, J plus plus, so that's still a true statement, so we'll step in. Okay, so here it sets the value of total back to 0 again. Because remember last time total pointed to 6, so total was equal to 6, so now it's resetting total back to 0. So we'll step over that. So now the inner for loop is going to iterate one more time. So I think you guys get the idea. We've kind of already done this. So just study this part here, this trick, and maybe you can actually just change the values of J and I. You could switch them to calls and rows, and see if that helps. So thanks for watching. We'll probably conclude 2D arrays in C# here. So thanks for watching, guys. In the next video, we'll be going over jagged arrays. So thanks for watching, guys. If you guys liked the video, you can like and subscribe to support the channel for more programming and investing tutorials. In the next video, we'll be doing jagged arrays, so hopefully I'll see you guys there. Thanks. Take care.